Greetings, everyone. This is Gail Macinda with History Quick, and I'd like to tell you about a little adventure I went on not too long ago. A couple years ago, I began working on a project on Scott Joplin. I was going to write a book about him and began doing my research. Now, I'm an organist, so I confess that I haven't learned to play every Scott Joplin song on the piano, but I appreciated the ones I did enough to inspire me to do this project. At the same time, I wanted to become more familiar with the rest of Scott Joplin's works, and so I began listening to recordings of them. Sometimes it sounded like things were just too fast, like the attention was being brought on the performer rather than on the music. Other times they felt just heavy-handed, and it just didn't really express what I considered the spirit of Scott Joplin. So I was talking to a friend about this and the challenges that I was having, and he said, "Oh, I think I've got an answer for you." And he sent me this set of Scott Joplin recordings by Richard Dowling, who was the pianist here. And I began listening to these and said, "Okay, this is I'm getting this one. Now I'm beginning to understand." And as I worked on the Joplin project, I would put on my headphones, kind of block out the rest of the world, and I would begin to listen. And I began to hear subtleties and melodic lines and intricacies that I had never heard before, and quite frankly, had never experienced in my own playing. So all of that said, it is with great pleasure today that I introduce you to our guest, who is Richard Dowling, that pianist who made this CD set. So welcome to History Quick, Richard. We are delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Gail. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. I know that from the liner notes, you have gone to great effort to play it as it was designed to be, the way that Joplin wrote it. Can you tell me why that was important for you to do that?
Two reasons, really. Number one, I'm a classical pianist, so of course I like to do things by the book. That's how we're trained in music school, as you well know. And number two is an admonition from Scott Joplin himself. If you go to his School of Ragtime, which was a piece of sheet music, it's in the big Joplin book. It's 6 or 7 exercises for the piano that teach you how to play the syncopation found in his rags. Seems a little bit elementary by today's standards, being in the rap era and having gone through rock and roll, but 120 years ago, people didn't understand syncopation. So Joplin wrote down all the various permutations of syncopation and published it as a little short exercise book. And in the little preface to each etude, he actually says that he composed his rags and expected them to be played as written without any embellishments. It's there in black and white. Now, why? Why did he say that? Because the tradition today is to add your own improvisations and embellishments to the music. It's because the pianists of his own day were so taken with the music, they had what were called cutting contests, where they would see who could outplay one another. And that outplaying usually meant playing exceedingly fast and adding extra notes and jumping up and down octaves, playing in different registers, just seeing who could go the furthest with the piece. And he felt, being a trained classical composer himself, that ruined his music. So when I made this recording, I really wanted to honor his wishes. So all the repeats are there and none of the embellishments that you typically hear at ragtime festivals today. And I indulge in those improvisations and embellishments when I perform live. But I just didn't want to do it for the recording because it was a recording for posterity.
Well, as someone who has enjoyed these recordings, I am deeply appreciative of your attention to those details. It really did mean a lot to me. And as I was saying, I would listen to the recordings and I would begin to hear either a tenderness that I had not expected to hear in ragtime, or then I would hear something with great energy and great strength. And I think that was a surprise to me. I didn't expect to hear that much diversity. I tended to think of ragtime, the uninitiated, thinking of it as just being kind of loud and fast. And so to hear those subtleties was really an inspiration and an education for me both. Now, I know you have a very extensive repertoire, a great number of composers that you have studied and performed. How did you get so involved specifically with Joplin?
Well, it's very simple. Like millions of people, kids and adults, in 1973, 74, when I was just a piano student growing up in Houston, Texas, uh, the entertainer hit the airwaves in the movie The Sting, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture in 1974. It came out, I think, in December 1973. So 1974 was a big year when the entertainer basically took over the planet. And I begged my private piano teacher to let me learn the entertainer, and she conceded to let me do that. I went out to the sheet music store in Houston and bought the inch-and-a-half thick book of the complete works of Scott Joplin. I still have that same book with the green maple leaf on the cover. And
Mm-hmm.
I learned the entertainer plus I guess about a half a dozen other rags, mostly behind her back. And that's how I fell in love with Scott Joplin. And it sounds like a great story, but that same story played out millions of times, as I said, with both students and adult amateurs, pianists in 1974 and beyond. I mean, the entertainer still remains one of the most recognized tunes in the entire world. So when you say that Scott Joplin is a world famous composer, that is no exaggeration.
I understand. At that particular time, the early 70s, I was working in a sheet music store. And I remember how many copies of The Entertainer went out the door over and over. We could not keep them in stock. And I know how challenging the piece is to play. And I often wondered how many people mastered the song that they were eager to have. And then I got to thinking, in some ways, it probably doesn't matter. If they enjoyed it and they were inspired by it, and it got them to playing again, then it has been successful in its own way. Now, I know that you have gone on to perform Scott Joplin works many times in many places, but specifically, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about your Carnegie Hall experience with the Joplin works.
On April 1st, 2017, so oh my goodness, almost 4 years ago, I performed the complete works of Scott Joplin at Carnegie Hall in Weil Recital Hall. It's the small hall of the three concert halls that Carnegie Hall comprises in New York City. And April 1st, 2017 was a very special date because exactly 100 years before that, on April 1st, 1917, Scott Joplin passed away in New York City. So it was the centennial day of his death. And thanks to the stars and planets aligning, April 1st, 2017 was a Saturday. Saturday being, of course, the best day to be able to attract an audience, better than a Tuesday night, for example. And so I booked, a year before that, I booked Weil Hall and performed all of his works in two concerts, one right after another, with a couple of hours break in between. Uh, on that date, April 1st, it was about 4.5 hours of of a show, so to speak. And I had an ambulance waiting out on West 57th Street to take me away to Bellevue Hospital for psychiatric evaluation. Because I have to say, doing two big, completely different concerts in one day in a place like Carnegie Hall is a real test of not only physical stamina but emotional strength. I was extraordinarily anxious about it. Both concerts were sold out. I had many friends, fans, and family members there. So the stakes were high, and of course, I wanted to do as well as I could do to honor Mr. Joplin's memory.
Wow. I have done concerts that were up to about an hour and a half, and I know after that I am just totally wiped out. When I read that you had done these two back to back, it was a jaw dropper for me. I am absolutely amazed and impressed. Well, what other kind of venues have you shared Scott Joplin's works?
Well, I was very fortunate. I have an agent, a manager in New York, and when I first proposed this to him, he was a bit disdainful of the idea. I've always loved ragtime, as I said, since I was a boy. And I just thought, well, we've got a good marketing idea here. And so we ran with it and ended up getting about 100 engagements across the United States to perform Joplin recitals. That was over a 2-year period in the rest of 2017. It took a while to get the ball rolling, all of 2018, and about half of 2019. Of course, the pandemic's put a stop to all concertizing. So I had a really, really good run, 100 engagements, well paid, reintroducing Joplin's music to people, many of whom had never heard it. It was also the perfect time because people who were, say, 20 to 50 years old, or even younger, 10 to 50 years old in 1974 are now the concert going public. So they're the ones that go out and buy tickets and attend concerts. They're all now in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. And they're used to going to concerts. And when they saw, the advertising for what I called Great Scott was the name of my all Joplin concerts. They thought to themselves, I had so many people say, oh, I loved the Sting back in 1974. I haven't heard anybody play that in so long. I went out and got a ticket immediately. This is one of the best things it reminded me of the girl that I was dating at the time. That's when I met my wife. There's so many good memories from 1974. So I just happened to hit it just at the right time for the concert going public. There's enough people around still who remember the Sting and Robert Redford and Paul Newman and Marvin Hamlish, that for them it was sort of a trip down a happy memory lane.
That was perfect timing for you. That no doubt about that. And it was perfect timing for us as well. Well, you've been very gracious in your willingness to share one of your performances with us today, and that is going to be Elite Syncopations. What would you like to tell us about that piece before we take a listen to it?
Well, Elite Syncopations is one of the earlier Joplin works, but it's a classic rag. That's what we call. Joplin didn't write just ragtime pieces. He also wrote marches and waltzes, and of course 2 operas as well. He was a classically trained composer, and thanks to his studies in classical music, he wanted to sort of lift ragtime up from being just sort of popular music, so to speak. It certainly was popular music, but he put his own special touch. He has the Mozartian gift of endlessly memorable melodies, number one. But just the title, Elite Syncopations, tells us something. It doesn't have the word ragtime in it. It doesn't have the word rag. Ragtime just means ragged time, which is just vernacular for syncopation. Syncopation sounds like, it's a music theory word that sounds like some kind of blood disease or something. Nevertheless, the fact that he put the word elite before it implies that this is high class ragtime. And so when you hear this piece, you can tell that it's been expertly crafted. And contrary to what I said earlier about playing it by the book, this performance is not by the book whatsoever. You'll hear in the repeat of the final section, I modulate up a step and really start playing faster and faster. I do that on purpose to try to whip the audience into a frenzy.
Well, let's take a listen to it and see what we think.
On April 1st, 2017, I had the privilege of performing the complete piano works of Scott Joplin here in New York at Carnegie Hall. I'd like to play his Elite Syncopations, a classic Joplin rag.
Okay, thank you for that performance, Richard. That was wonderful. I love the way that you look very relaxed while you're playing. I don't know how you do that because I would be rather frantic at that point, but you look like you're enjoying it and having fun. What can we learn from this song and other Joplin works? What does Joplin give to us? What's our gift?
Oh, this is the thing I tell audiences everywhere, which is ragtime gives you energy. It will cure the blues. It even Joplin wrote in that exercise book that I was talking about. He says that ragtime has a curiously intoxicating effect. And you don't even have to drink anything in order to become intoxicated. I mean, it's nearly impossible to sit still when listening to ragtime. At first, your foot starts tapping, and then your head starts nodding, and then you feel like you want to get up and dance. And that's why ministers, coast to coast, decried ragtime, that if you listened to too much of it, you were going to go to hell. And so, of course, when amateur pianists would go to the sheet music store and they have all the legitimate classical music out there, Bach and Mozart and Chopin and Beethoven, and then there's the Joplin Maple Leaf Rag over in the corner. They'd have to send you home with Maple Leaf Rag in a brown paper sack so that you could hide it in the piano bench amongst the legit stuff and just take it out and play it when mom and dad were gone, because it was considered really low-class music. Again, that's why he wanted to elevate its status by many of the titles of his rags don't have the word ragtime in the title on purpose.
I certainly wish he could have enjoyed the fame that he was due during his lifetime. To me, that's one of the great tragedies out of the story. And at the same time, I'm thankful that it exists in print so that we can reproduce it today and we can continue to enjoy his music as it goes along. Well, Richard, thank you so much for being our guest today. We really do appreciate it. We've learned a lot. This has been great fun. And I will put links to the CDs as well as a whole bunch of other stuff down below in the description box. We invite you to subscribe to these videos. You know how that works. Hit that notification bell if you'd like to know any other time when we have uploaded videos. And as always, guys, we learn from the past, but we do not live there. Go and be awesome today. Bye for now.